There's a wonderful, let me get to this page, if I can. This is in the words of Denver with Debbie being sick. Faith, as Paul the Apostle, is the assurance of things hoped for. Sorry, this might be Ron. The conviction of things not seen. This is Ron. I clung to the faith like a ropeless climber to the sides of a cliff. Faith that the God who said he loved me would not rip my heart out, steal my wife and my children's mother. Maybe this sounds stupid, arrogant even, but with all the bad press he'd been getting, I felt now might be a good time for God to buff up his reputation with a miracle. And there's no miracle like good healing. We could go on Oprah and spread the news. So I told him so. Deborah and I would have loved to do nothing at this point, no chemo, no surgery, no experimental drugs. We knew and believed in the scripture, all good things for the good of those that wait on the Lord. Wait upon the Lord, be still and know that God is good. But I wasn't willing to sit and wait, and I don't think Deborah was either. So they continued to fight, and they continued to fight, and they continued to fight. Deborah becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. And during this weakness, Denver decides he needs to do something. I think Denver feels a bit useless, as we all do, as we watch someone who becomes terminal and we just want to do something, but we don't know what to do. And Ron found out, he kept looking for Denver. He couldn't find Denver during the day. So he went over to the Union Rescue Gospel Mission and said, "Where's Denver?" And they said, "He's sleeping." This was during the day. And Ron said, "Well, why is he sleeping?" And they said, "Because he's holding vigil all night long for Debbie." That he said she had enough people praying for her during the day that she really needed somebody praying for her at night. So every night, Ron would go out by the dumpster that was next to the Union Rescued Gospel Mission and pray for Debbie all night long. There again, it speaks to the tapestry of friendship that creates these bonds that are only godlike. They're only godlike. These two people who could not be more different, these three people that are brought together through tragedy, through grace. Debbie actually, in her last moments, talks to Jesus, tells Ron she had been in a bit of a coma. She suddenly starts talking, says she sees Jesus, tells Ron she needs wings. So she's seeing things, she's talking, and we're about to lose her at that point. And at that point, Denver has some thoughts on what Debbie did for his life. He tells Ron, "Mr. Ron, I was captive in a devil's prison. That was easy for Miss Debbie to see. But I gotta tell you, many folks had seen me behind bars in the prison for more than 30 years, and they just walked by. Kept their keys in their pockets and left me locked up. Now, I ain't trying to run those other folks down, because I'm not a nice fella. I was kind of dangerous and probably just as happy to stay in prison. But Miss Debbie was different. She's seen me behind them bars and reached way down in her pocket and pulled out the keys God gave her and used one to unlock the prison door, and she set me free." Denver pounded home those last words like 8 separate nails and sat back in his chair. So the love and care and dreams of one woman set one man free. And then Debbie is lost. And then an amazing thing happened. They have a memorial service for Debbie. And suddenly Ron gets a call that all of these memorial gifts are coming into the Union Rescue Gospel Mission. And it's a miracle, because the Union Rescue Gospel Mission needed to be rebuilt. And these gifts are coming in from all over in Debbie's memory. And I can tell you that I've been to the Union Rescue Gospel Mission in Dallas, and it's a beautiful building. And right in the center of the building is an exquisite, beautiful chapel called the Deborah Hall Chapel that was named for Debbie. But again, it shows the movement of God, how God moves us even after we're gone to do great deeds. And so all of this money poured in to rebuild the Union Rescue Gospel Mission. After Debbie's death, Union Rescue Gospel Mission was rebuilt, but Denver and Ron started on a speaking tour. And as Denver's obituary says, he's gone to over 400 places. I think that was maybe in a month. I swear they've been all over the place. I do have to make a disclaimer. Willie was kind to say that I'm friends with Denver and Ron. I wish I was really close friends. I've met them on a couple of occasions. Denver sang a song for me once. I've heard him sing many times. I know them as many know them, but I think they're incredible people. And I think that so many lives have been touched through their ministry. And one of the things that the book talks about is before Debbie died, she was holding on. And we've seen this sometimes. Some of us that know people who have passed away, they hold on because there's something they haven't finished yet. And Denver went in and sat on Debbie's bed. He said, "Miss Debbie, it's your time. It's okay. And I know that you want to pass the torch in the work you've been doing with the homeless. So you pass it to me. I'm going to take that torch for you." And sure enough, right after that, Debbie died. So Denver felt that he had given his word to Miss Debbie, and by George, he was going to carry that torch. And he did. And anybody that knows about Denver knows he wasn't real comfortable in getting in front of groups. I think Ron, every time they went out to talk to a group, had to talk Denver into coming. Now, Denver get up and sing a great spiritual for you. He was probably more comfortable doing that than talking, but he made a promise. He made a commitment to Debbie that he was going to carry her message about homelessness. He was going to carry that with him. And he did so until March 31st of this year, which I think is quite admirable. So, as I read this book, I thought of what resonated with me in this book? What have I learned? As I said, I've been working with the homeless, thank you to First Presbyterian Church, for 21 years now. It's just my passion. It's my calling. It's what moves my heart. I don't know why. My husband looked at me and said, What? Why do you do this? And I said, because I don't see the difference between them and me. I really don't. And it's a gift that God's given me. But I think this book and my work says 9 lessons. This is what I've pulled out, and that's what I wanted to share with you to close today. The first lesson, as I said, is you can't judge a book by its cover. When you look at those people on the streets, don't presume that you know them. Don't presume that you can understand them. They might look ragged and torn and tattered. I remember the woman who came into Haven for Hope. She was ragged looking and pretty dirty. She had 2 huge black eyes and a baby on each hip. And I thought, man, what a rough life you had to have had. And it turns out that she was a farmer's wife from Iowa, I think. And she'd had a pretty good life, but her husband had been beating up on her. And so she got all the money she could get together and came on a bus to San Antonio. And so she was fully educated. She'd had a life like a lot of us, but she just had a husband who was beating up on her. So don't judge a book by its cover is the number one thing, because if you only looked at Denver Moore in this book, that mean, angry black man that walked in was going to kill somebody over his shoes, you wouldn't have seen the great wisdom of the man who said, "Are you sure those keys aren't owning you?" There was a lot of depth to Denver. Second, you never know someone's story until you ask it. I think we all know this in the room. They call the Presbyterians frozen chosen, We don't offer our story very often, but the homeless really don't. And when you hear those stories, just like when you hear Ron's, it brings you to tears. When you hear those stories of the homeless, see, it's doing it to me every time I think of those stories. It'll bring you to tears, because these are people who have led lives just like you and me, many of them, but hard times, hard circumstances have befallen them. And so take the time to listen to their stories. That's what Debbie did in this book. She took the time to hear Ron's story. And Ron, well, she kind of sent Ron to do it, but to get to know their stories, very, very important. 3, we are all shaped by our histories. Ron was shaped by his history of what happened to him. The meeting on the street with the white woman at 15, with 3 boys putting a noose around his neck. Any of us know that shaped his history. That shaped his vision of white people. And I think that a lot of us are shaped by our history, but then again, if you don't know the story, you don't know the history. So remember that every person you meet, particularly the homeless, are so shaped by the history of their lives. And they are seeped in that history and sometimes stuck in that history. And it takes somebody like Debbie to reach deep in their pocket to grab the key and unlock them from that history. Nothing or no one is ever hopeless. Somebody would have looked at Denver. I think many people looked at Denver and assumed he was homeless or hopeless. I've never met a homeless person that I've ever thought was hopeless. I believe in God's power and God's sovereignty, and I believe that God working through us can unlock people from the prisons of homelessness and help them towards self-sufficiency. That's what I believe. And I think this book shows that. Next, I think transformation in anyone's life is really through relationship. Haven't we all found that in our own lives? We are transformed through the relationships we have with those that we love and those that we come in contact with. Look at what transformed Denver's life. It wasn't money. It wasn't a program. It was a relationship. It was the relationship that unlocked his life. And so I truly believe that the transformational process, whether it's through Christ to us or us to others, transformation is through relationships. It is relational. And I think that's important to remember, particularly with the homeless. Color is blind in relationships. That's what's shown here. Denver had to kind of get over that. But in Debbie's eyes, she didn't see Denver as an angry black man. She just saw Denver as a man she saw in her dreams that had the wisdom of Solomon, according to Ecclesiastes. And so I think color is blind in relationships. I think another thing that this book shows that I really didn't talk about is that the homeless have amazing radar for those who truly care about helping them or those who just want to do something good. In this book, there's a real poignant moment when Denver talks about Debbie and Ron being different because every Tuesday night they showed up to serve dinner. And Denver says, there's a lot of do-gooders who come on Easter and Christmas. And they think about us, and then they go home and they give thanks. And it's a long time before they think about us again. And what I've learned with working with the homeless is that their radar is incredibly sensitive to people who really care and to those who are just trying to do something good. And it's not that it's not that doing something good isn't good, but if you're not genuine about it, their radar is incredibly sensitive and they can tell it. And I think Denver talks about that in this book. One of the things that I think was most poignant about this book, and the thing that I have found in my work with the homeless, is the homeless feel invisible. They're walked over in the streets. How many of us see someone sitting on the street, and what do? We don't see them. We walk by. We don't stop and talk. We're frightened, maybe, but it's as if they're invisible. We just walk by. And when I talk to the homeless, when I get to sit down and really talk to them, what they tell me is they feel invisible. Nobody sees them, and more importantly, nobody talks to them. And all they really want to do is what Denver did, and that's they just want to tell their story. They want to tell their personal story. How many of us just want to share our personal story? But when you're invisible, you don't get that opportunity. So I think Denver was invisible until Debbie and Ron found him. Finally, I think Debbie knew that she'd impacted Ron's life, I think, and Denver's life. But I think what this book tells us is, as we all know, we plant seeds. I know in my work with the homeless, there have been so many times when I walk away from lives and I think, drat, didn't work, didn't help. But I think you plant those seeds and you never know when they're going to bloom. And I think that that's true in everybody's life, but particularly with the homeless, particularly those who are really chronic homeless. You may never see the fruition of your work. The joy of your labors is never recognized, but you never know what's going to happen down the road. And Debbie died. She never knew that money came in through the seeds of her labor to build a brand new Union Rescue Gospel mission. She never knew that Denver and Ron were on a talking circuit, including Denver going to the White House, which I think is wonderful, in his tuxedo. She never knew what she started by having a vision and just saying to her husband, let's go feed. So this to me, if you have not had a chance to read the book, I hope I didn't ruin the story, you will cry. You absolutely will cry. But it's poignant, it's wise, it's one of the greatest things. I've given so many copies of this book away, that's why I don't have the paper copy. It's just magnificent, and it teaches us what life is really all about. So I'm so incredibly grateful to have been given this opportunity to share with you the poignancy and the relevance and the importance of the messages in this book. And really pray that God will kind of work through this book maybe in your lives. And we always need volunteers at Haven for Hope. And SAM Ministry always needs volunteers. And CAM Ministry always needs just people to sit and listen and talk. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed my time, and thank you, Willie. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ann. That's just so enlightening, and I hope that we can all do something in our lives like you have done to make the lives of these people just a little bit better. Thank you.
Well, .com likes the new Happy House, Happy House 3, and Happy House 2 is over, folks. Yep. Yesterday, we gathered the last in mail. We pulled up the mailbox. We went to the post office. We changed the address. And it's over, .com. You loved Happy House 2, didn't you? And you loved Happy House 1. Well, they're all over now, .com. Yep. And she loves Happy House 3, this one. You want to see the dressing room and .com's room and the catnip room? It's an extra room, really. It isn't used at all. But it has nice closets. a hat with Glendora, and a cat with Glendora. This is a nice, brand new refrigerator. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mace and Mr. Linda Kolodny. That's their name, Kolodny. I told them I bought a bottle of Kolodny. Smells good. Now, this is yesterday's DVD diary carry camera. It's done. So, come down here and stop, and it will write to the disk. Isn't that cute? Is that what the inside of your head looks like? And we can put this camcorder on a tripod. And we'll take this camcorder, that was a carry camcorder for yesterday, and press menu, and it'll come up delete, press the bottom button, and it says delete. File, select, or delete all. Let's delete all. Okay, delete all. And you sure? Yes. Okay, delete. Deleting is now happening. This fella is done writing to the disk. Eject him. And he will be the next DVD diary. Finish that one. And take out the AV cord, audio visual cord, close him up, take him to the empty room, close his lens, his precious lens, his precious eyesight, take out his AC cord, alternating current, and take him to the empty room to rest with the other 4, 5, 6 camcorders. And now, I wanted to talk to you about in 1952, there was a question that you all should ask, that we all should ask. What does God want us to do with this life that God has given us? And I sat down and I taught and thought about it and listened and meditated and meditated. And God came up with the answer, television. Well, 1952 television was only 3 years old, and it was everybody's life. Everybody stopped everything to watch television. They stopped going to meetings at night to stay home and watch television. They didn't eat in the kitchen or the dining room anymore. They ate in the living room with a TV dinner and a TV table, a TV little table that you put up quickly and put down quickly. So, the directions begin to come. Where is television big? It's big in New York City and it's big in Hollywood. All right, you go to Hollywood then. So, I went to Hollywood. And I got a job down in the financial district in Los Angeles, which was, must be 10 or 20 miles from Westwood, where I was living, which is where the University of Los Angeles is. And marking on the chalkboard what the stocks were selling for. Well, I wasn't doing them any good, and that really wasn't much television, was it? So I took a writing course, TV writing course, that was given by Los Angeles Adult Education Extension, University of Los Angeles. And I took it because it was given at NBC, Hollywood, Sunset and Vine, where all the radio shows had emanated from for years, all during the 40s. All those famous radio shows. And I saw the studios, Fibber McGee and Molly, and Bob Hope. And so I went to the writing class, the television writing class, and guess what? The personnel office was right across the hall from the room where we had the course. And I met Martha Wiley, assistant personnel director, and I talked to her. And we went out Saturday bike racing together. And she got me a job in the script service department of NBC television, and radio. One Man's Family, Dragnet. And I met quite a few people and quite a few stars, like Jack Benny and Red Skelton and Bob Hope, and Tallulah Bankhead, and Marilyn Monroe, and Groucho Marx. The list goes on and on. And I got a few engagements to tell jokes. It was supposed to be television, it was supposed to be jokes. And it was supposed to be on camera, and it wasn't supposed to be production. This is what all came above, I heard. I thought I heard. So 2 years of that, and learning a great, great big fact that if you're going to start out on TV, you don't go to Los Angeles, and you don't go to Hollywood, and you don't go to New York City, because you're going to make mistakes because you're inexperienced. You go back into the woods and you get your experience. And that's what I did. I went to Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and started the Glendora and Her Picture Party. Learned a very important thing about television. It was sponsored. That's all the TV stations were interested in. Was it sponsored? Was it going to bring money in it? Was it going to put money into their pockets? And from the Glendora and Her Picture Party, the next show was Manchester, New Hampshire. It was called the SS Glendora. I was supposed to be their skipper. And they were the little children were the mateys. They were the mateys. And here it is, jumbled after 60 years. I wonder if this is the best light for you. Let me move the tripod over here. This is a dining room to anybody who lives regularly. And Glendora is on a saintly eating, and so she doesn't use a dining room.